Hey bees, I'm Marie from Humblebee and Me, and today I wanted to talk about the 12 most common myths and misconceptions and sort of questions that I get about preservative use in the world of DIY skincare and cosmetics. When you first get into making your own skincare and cosmetics, preservatives are confusing. They're intimidating, there's tons of different ones, and you wonder if they're really even necessary. And I have a couple theories about this. Theory number one is that you've probably never actually seen a body product spoil if you've never made your own. And that's because the stuff that we buy from the store is so thoroughly preserved that it's effectively infinitely shelf stable. I have never seen a lotion that I purchased at the drugstore mold, but I've certainly seen quite a few made in my own kitchen go all kinds of fuzzy. So I think when you're new to this, it's very easy to think that this category of products can't go bad simply because you've never seen it happen. And I don't even think that that's an active assumption that you're making. It's just, you've seen bananas go soft your entire life, so you know that happens to bananas. But if you've never seen a lotion do anything but just continue to be lotion for years and years and years on end, it's easy to think that that's just the default state of that product, which is unfortunately, as we will learn, not true. Another part of my theory is we draw a lot of analogies to our kitchen. And we sort of think that, well, when I make myself food from fresh ingredients, I don't put preservatives in it. This is true, but you also treat your food in a very, very different way, right? You keep it in the fridge. If you know it's going to be in your fridge for more than a few days, you'll freeze it. If it smells dodgy, or even if it doesn't and you're just getting a little suspicious, you'll throw it away rather than continue to use it. So a lot of people sort of half apply that methodology to their handmade skin products, and I, embarrassingly enough, definitely did the same thing when I first started. And I thought, well, I'm just making small amounts and I'm using it up quickly. Quickly being in less than a year. Oh, that's embarrassing. You would never do that with food. You would never make a beautiful hollandaise sauce and leave it on your counter for weeks and weeks and weeks and months and a year and keep using it, right? We are using, in many ways, ingredients that are just as fresh as we would use in food. So we are dealing with very, very similar shelf lives, that is, very short ones, unless, of course, we include a preservative, which we're going to talk about today. The third part of my theory here is that there's just a lot of bad information out there, and I will readily admit with a large amount of shame that I was one of those sources when I first started Humblebee and Me back in 2011, because I just didn't know any better and I wasn't looking at good sources. And so I want to save you that embarrassment, save you that risk, that potential for an infection or for making yourself or somebody you love ill, and address some of these myths that I hear that I believe stem out of sort of the three prongs of never seen it happen, think it's a lot like cooking, but don't treat it the same way you'd treat your leftovers, and just flat out misinformation. I'm also going to put a bunch of really great resources in the description box below for you to go read to learn more about different preservatives, because there are so many. So what's a preservative? A preservative is a blend of different chemicals designed to inhibit the growth of gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, fungi, and other gross microbial things that we don't want living in our body products. They're a blend because different chemicals target different things, different microbes, different gross, crawly things. So that's why preservatives are always at least 2 ingredients, usually 3 or 4. So when you see a single ingredient preservative, could be a little dubious. Do some research, again, description box below, and see if it's truly broad spectrum, because a lot of the time they aren't. It's similar to emulsifying waxes. If you see a single ingredient like emulsifying wax, it's very often not a complete emulsifying wax. And when do we include preservatives in our concoctions? We include them whenever we add water, or whenever our concoction could come into contact with water, as long as it's not a single-use product. So for something like a face mask, where you make it in a small amount and you use it up all at once, you don't need a preservative. If it's a sugar scrub nugget and you can just take 1 nugget into the bath with you and use that all up, you don't need a preservative. But if it's a sugar scrub bar and you're going to take it into the bath and then let it dry out multiple times, then you do need a preservative. If it's a lotion, you do need a preservative. So that's the general gist of it. That's about all the basic knowledge that you need to get into the rest of this video. But if you want to learn more, please check out the description box below. I'm putting a bunch of great resources and further reading in there so you can deepen your knowledge of preservatives. But okay, let's dive in. My product is all natural, so it doesn't require preservatives. This is pretty much exactly the opposite of being true. Think about the things in your fridge. Think about like the natural things, the things like bananas and milk and yogurt and cheese and meat. And then think about how long they last. Is it indefinitely? No, it is the exact opposite of indefinitely. All of those things come with expiry dates printed on them, and those expiry dates are pretty short, and they are heavily contingent on you keeping that product in your fridge. Natural things don't have an infinite shelf life. That's part of what makes them natural. They're made up out of things that microbes actually want to eat. We take a look at things that do have a very long shelf life. Plastic, Cheese Whiz, margarine, that whipped cream that comes in a tub, the whipped petroleum product topping. Like all those things have very long shelf lives, but they're not really what most of us would call natural. Regardless of what your definition of the word natural is, I'm fairly certain it doesn't include Cheese Whiz. So yeah, all natural does not mean infinite shelf life in any way, shape, or form. My products are only for my friends, my family, or myself, so I don't need a preservative. This logic has always sort of baffled me because, well, I assume that you love your friends and family and yourself more than the general public. So why are you okay with putting them at risk? The best thing that I can think of is that you're fairly certain this group of people is less likely to sue you than the general public. Like, if you had your mom over for dinner, would you dig something fuzzy out of the back of your fridge and feed it to her? No, because you love your mom and you don't want to make her sick. So why would you do that with skincare products? Like, just no. You love your grandparents. Don't give them a staph infection. Put preservatives in the products that you give them too. They also matter. I'm going to use it up really quickly so it doesn't need a preservative. This one's actually a little dubious. If you wanted to put it in your fridge, keep it there for about 3-4 days tops, and use all of that up then within that period of time, that would probably be okay. But most people don't use the cosmetics and skincare products that they make in such a short period of time. Usually because even when you make just 50 to 100 grams of lotion, that's way too much lotion to use up in just 3 or 4 days. So yes, kind of, but you'll be throwing a lot of stuff away if you're doing it that way. And it's really, really hard to make products in small enough batches that you can use them up in 3 to 4 days. Also, I don't love putting cold lotion on my skin, but you might. So you can kind of get away with this one, but realize that your window is so much smaller than I think a lot of people think it is. I think they're sort of like, well, it's like ketchup. As long as I keep it in the fridge, it'll be fine. No, more like raw meat. Think like raw meat. How long would you leave like uncooked fish in your fridge and then cook it and still eat it? That's about how you should treat your body products if you are keeping them in the fridge. So yeah, quickly, okay, but very quickly. It looks fine and it smells fine, so it must be fine, right? I didn't need to put a preservative in it. It's been like 2 weeks and it's still okay. So if our noses and eyes were a foolproof way of determining if something had harmful levels of bacteria in it, nobody would ever get food poisoning. Bacteria is tiny. You can put 500,000 of them in a teaspoon of water and it will still look fine and smell totally normal. You cannot determine the bacterial content of something just by looking at it or just by smelling it. So the fact that it looks fine and smells fine is completely useless. The most that you can generally say about that is that it doesn't visibly have mold on it. I think most people who got food poisoning could probably tell you that about the meal that made them violently ill as well. So yeah, please no. Put a preservative in that. The person I'm making this for is allergic to preservatives, so I can't use preservatives. I would say that if the person that you're making this for is allergic to preservatives, their immune system would probably also enjoy not being tempted by staph or any of the other gross things that can grow in a concoction in a fairly short period of time. If the person you are making things for is so immunocompromised or allergic or skin sensitive to things that they can't handle preservatives. They definitely don't want to be exposed to a bacterial orgy happening in whatever it is you happen to give them. So if you're making something for somebody who is that sensitive, don't make them anything that contains water. It's that simple. Vitamin E is a preservative. No, it's not. Vitamin E is an antioxidant. It will do absolutely nothing to prevent a microbial orgy from sprouting up in your body lotion. Like, zilch. Absolutely nothing. This is a really common myth. Sometimes I think it comes about because a lot of suppliers include vitamin E and rosemary seed extract and sodium lactate in their preservatives section, even though they are antioxidants. So I think people just sort of see that listed under there like, oh, sweet, hey, that's cool. That sounds like way more natural and less scary than like Germaben. So I'm going to use that. But it still isn't, despite the fact that you might have seen it listed there. This is also a fairly commonly repeated myth on Pinterest. So yeah, I've definitely read it many times. I know I definitely believed it when I first started doing this. So please avoid my mistakes. Don't do what I did. Vitamin E is not a preservative. Ingredients X and Y both have very long shelf lives. So when I combine them, that combination should also have a very long shelf life. So this can be true. If you're mixing together, say, clay and salt or a blend of dried herbs, yeah, those things will have very long shelf lives. But if one of those ingredients is water, regardless of how shelf-stable water is when it's on its own, now you need a broad spectrum preservative. So this one's kind of true, but it's a pretty important distinction between all of those other very shelf-stable ingredients and water. My formula includes ingredients that have antibacterial and antiviral properties, so that's my preservative. So I sometimes hear this about the inclusion of things like tea tree oil or other essential oils that have antimicrobial and antiviral properties. It would be so nice if this was true, if including tea tree oil would preserve your formulations. Unfortunately, it is absolutely nowhere close to being true. They are nowhere near as potent as we require to defend our concoctions. So no, sorry. The fact that some of your ingredients are antimicrobial has absolutely no bearing on the shelf life of your product. One of the ingredients I'm including already contains a preservative, and that preservative will preserve my entire project. So sadly, no. Preservatives are carefully chosen for the products that they're put into, and a huge part of what makes them work is their concentration. So if you are including 10 or 20%, say, aloe vera juice or hydrosol in a project, and that hydrosol came with a preservative in it, that preservative is now so heavily diluted that it is nowhere close to being effective. It may also be completely the wrong kind of preservative for your project. So yeah, sorry, you still need to include your own, calculated for the entire size of your batch and not just that 10 or 20% of that one ingredient that is just part of your project. I added a broad spectrum preservative to this, so I never ever need to worry about it spoiling no matter what. Goodness, how I wish this was true. That would be amazing. Unfortunately, it's not. So imagine you got like a pot of chili, and then you added 0.5% of liquid Germal Plus and left it on your counter for a month. I can promise you, you are not going to want to eat that after a month, and in fact, you probably wouldn't actually let it get to a month because of all the flies and mold probably starting to like crawl out of the pot. Like, ugh. Preservatives valiantly defend our products, but if you drop a nuke on them, there's really not a lot that they can do. They will do the best that they can, but we have to try to reduce the amount of sort of enemy fire that we unleash on them. So a lot of ingredients are notoriously hard to preserve. Food is super hard to preserve. So putting something like milk in a concoction is just asking for trouble. Clay is also very hard to preserve. Botanicals are hard to preserve. Making infusions, like using tea instead of water, that's also very hard to preserve. So you need to keep your bacterial temptations to a minimum. You also want to keep your manufacturing as clean as possible. It's good to use packaging that reduces contamination. So as much as I love open top jars, this This right here, giant bacteria covered mitt, and you're dipping it into your product, and that's yet another source of contamination. So yeah, broad spectrum preservatives aren't Superman. They're trying their best, but they're not going to win absolutely every battle that you throw at them. So try to work as a team and don't make their lives impossible. I don't need to preserve this because I didn't put any water in it. I used floral water or aloe vera juice or witch hazel or tea instead. Sadly, this is another one of those that's basically the opposite of being true. If you think about what aloe vera juice is or what rose water is, it's like 99.9% water, and then you've added some sort of botanical matter to it so that it would actually spoil faster than if you had just used water. So as much as it seems like a really wonderful trick to be like, aha, what a wonderful workaround, sadly no, there's still a lot of water in your concoction, and because it has other delicious bacterial temptations added to it to make it special, more expensive water, you need a preservative even more than you did before. All broad spectrum preservatives are functionally the same and work in the same way in the same circumstances. It would be so nice if this was true, it would be so easy, but sadly no. There are loads of different preservatives out there, and some are water soluble and some are oil soluble. Some of them are more pH sensitive than others. Some of them work better in lower pHs. Some of them work better in slightly higher pHs. Some of them are deactivated by ingredients like the polysorbates or by cationic ingredients. Some of them are stronger than others. Some of them don't work in the presence of vitamin C. Some of them cause the pH of your final product to drift. There's so many variables here. So for this, I'm going to refer you to this wonderful resource from Making Skincare. Jane Barber put this together. She's a professional cosmetic chemist. It's a wonderful resource. I'm going to link to it in the description box below because YouTube doesn't let me link to any website other than my own in here. So go check out that page. It's a wonderful review of all the different preservatives that you can buy. It tells you, are they truly broad spectrum? Because some of them aren't, especially the more natural ones. You do need to add other preservatives to get full coverage. Some of them, yeah, you'd have to buffer your pH down to make sure that they work. So this is a large part of the reason why I like Liquid Germall Plus so much, is because it's fairly foolproof. It has a wide effective pH range and it's not easily deactivated. But if you don't like the sounds of it and you're looking for something else, I cannot recommend this resource enough. So scroll down, click on it, read it, and enjoys the knowledge. Okay, so those are the 12 myths and misconceptions that I hear most often about preservatives and why they're a myth. I would love to hear anything that you have learned about preservatives recently, or any sort of myths you're maybe wondering about or questions that you have. I would also really encourage you to check out the links in the description box below. There's some great further reading down there from people much smarter than I am. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and I will see you next time.